Scream Bloody Gore by Death is celebrating 35 years. So in this video, I'm going to talk about that album. But more importantly, this is the album that marked the birth of death metal. So I will be focusing on that as well. The album was released on May 25th, 1987. And the year 1987 is a very important year in metal. I think a lot of people don't really talk about it too much because at that time, metal was going into the mainstream. We had bands like Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses, which were more hard rock, but heavier music was becoming popular. But for a small subgenre of metal fans who wanted something different, a lot of metal subgenres were starting to emerge around this time. So for example, power metal was coming out around this time with Halloween's Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1. Black metal was coming out with Bathory's Under the Sign of the Black Mark. And we have Death with Scream Bloody Gore. So we have a lot happening in 1987, and specifically these three albums I just mentioned all came out in the month of May. So it's kind of like this explosion of new genres happening right now. Basically, the band Death took everything that they were doing with thrash metal at the time, and they just made it faster, heavier, more complex. And in this album in particular, it's not a concept album, but the lyrics are mostly inspired by classic horror movies. So for example, the song Regurgitated Guts was inspired by the City of the Living Dead. Zombie Ritual was inspired by a 1979 movie directed by Lucia Fulci called Zombie. Evil Dead was inspired by the movie of that same name that we all know of, and the title track was inspired by the movie Reanimator. So the band Death was the brainchild of Chuck Schuldiner. He pretty much recorded the vocals, guitars, and bass on this album. He had Chris Reifert on drums, and he had John Hand, who was actually given credit on the album, but he didn't really play on it. The album has 10 songs. It has 5 songs on each side, and it's about 38 minutes long. The album goes by pretty quickly. The style of music is all fast-paced death metal with complex riffs, and they go through a lot of tempo changes. Sometimes they slow it down, sometimes they speed it up. There are lots of blast beats. The vocals are very harsh death metal style vocals. One thing about Chuck and his vocals that you always understand what he was saying. I think that was something really cool about the band, and I've also heard people compare death metal to progressive metal at times, being that it is very complex, and I believe it's true to some degree. I think this album is much more of a straightforward death metal album. So the band would get more progressive as they release more albums, and on this album, all of the lyrics are about gore and horror stuff, whereas on subsequent albums, they would delve into deeper topics, current events, political issues, and so forth. But this is just horror movie stuff. So for example, on track number 5, Mutilation, the lyrics go, massacred, hacked to death, my revenge slicing deep into your flesh, the pain, intense dreams of hate, misery, feel my mind puke in your face, and disgust, it's time to die. So those are the lyrics. And the lyrics to the song Sacrificial mention the C word, which I'm not going to say because I know YouTube doesn't like that word. And that was actually the original title of the song, Sacrificial C word. But the record company didn't even want that on the record. So they kind of changed the name of the song. So anyway, talk about some of the other songs which I think are my favorites. So my favorite song is Zombie Ritual. Just starts out with that harmonized guitar riffs something along those lines. Just very melodic. You hear the bass guitar and something really it builds up 45 seconds into the song. It just gets really brutal, super fast, blast beats. And one thing I like about this band is that they do get very brutal during the song, but then they slow it down, kind of give you a break. They add in a little bit of melody, then they do something interesting, then they just get really brutal again. Another song I like, Regurgitated Guts. This one's cool. There's some elements of thrash metal, those chugging guitars, but also classic death metal. Speeds up, gets very brutal, slows down, and just has this heavy repetitive riffing. Torn to Pieces is another song I like. It has the intro, those machine gun style riffing, and just brings you right into the song. So the song is just very brutal start to finish, and it goes from fast to a lot faster. So the album ends with one of my favorite songs, the title track, Scream Bloody Gore. Just has some really complex rhythms, and Chuck gives one of his best vocal performances here. You know, he just screams. The chorus is very brutal and one of the more memorable songs on the album. And I know a lot of people say that the album Seven Churches by Possessed is the first death metal album. You know, that one came out in 1985, and that one also has like a song, track number 10, which is called Death Metal. And you can even say they actually like coined the term death metal. But if you look at the album Seven Churches, the lyrics are very like dark and evil and satanic, whereas Death, Scream, Bloody Gore is more related to like horror movies. And I think the dark evil stuff is more considered like black metal, and like the gory, flesh-ripping types of lyrics were more like death metal. Again, that's just my opinion. We can dispute it in the comments section. But anyway, the point of this video was to talk about the birth of death metal and how in 1987, specifically the month of May, all these subgenres were being created. So actually in tomorrow's video, we'll be talking about Halloween Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1. And that is like talking about like the birth of power metal. So it will be a similar type of video. Please stick around for that and keep on watching, and I'll see you in the next one.